It is 14 minutes past 7 on Newstalk Breakfast with Ciara Kelly and Shane Coleman. All passengers arriving into Ireland will need a negative PCR COVID test taken 72 hours before departure. The regulation had already been in place for travellers from the UK and South Africa, but from Saturday this is extended to all passengers. Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel magazine. Just bring us through this change, Eoghan.
Good morning, Shane. As you said, this applied to Britain and to South Africa. It's now being applied to all countries. Other European countries are doing something similar. Spain brought in regulations like this for Irish arriving passengers last Monday. Germany did so last week. A few other countries, Czechia, Switzerland. So it does seem to be the solution, or the perceived solution, that's sweeping a small group of European countries and the United States yesterday, which has a total exclusion policy for people with Irish passports. They've talked about bringing one in as well. A few answers, but a lot of questions raised by the policy which was announced yesterday.
I suppose one of those questions would be, should we have done this months ago?
That is a question, but the reality is that the aviation industry and the travel industry are looking for anything that would get things moving again. And there was a lot of debate, listeners will remember, about antigen testing. It didn't win the confidence of the medical community. PCR became pretty much through December the way to go. Real problem is it can be a little bit slow. It can be a little bit expensive, particularly in Ireland. We have the most expensive PCR tests. The problem here, though, is this a strategy, and is there an exit at the end of it? When you bring in something like this without a date that, it'll be re-examined, what happens at the end of it, and what metrics is it based upon? Because the HSPC figures for imported cases are extremely low. That's been repeated again and again by Tony Holohan. The grand total is 7 out of the 65,000 cases we have are related to international travel. That's a very low metric to be bringing in a measure like this, which could have the effect of the phrase used by Ryanair as mass cancellations and disconnecting the island.
Owen, it's a fair point you make. The counter argument, though, is that the Spanish and South African variants didn't just magic into this country. They got here by people travelling here.
The virus will get in, always has got in. There are about 30 countries out of the 200 odd that have kept it out, and a lot of countries pulled up the drawbridge. When you do curtail heavily international travel, sometimes it can make things worse. Mike Ryan, in his press conference 2 days ago in Switzerland, instanced that international travel was not Ireland's problem. It was our own managing what we have at home. And he'd have experience from Ebola. That's where we saw people closing borders, making things worse. The real question now is, what's our exit? Once we have this in place, is there a date that people can start planning again? Because what will happen is bookings will collapse. We know that from the PCR testing regime that was brought in other countries. We have the grand total of 23 flights in Dublin today, down from more than double that, and 80 before Christmas, 6 into Belfast City and 1 into Belfast International, Cork, Derry, nothing into Shannon. That's what we're looking at. Okay. And while that makes sense in a short-term measure, if it causes damage, which disconnecting the island can do in places that you didn't expect, anyone waiting for a parcel at the moment would know all about that. We need some sort of idea of what the exit strategy is and what happens next, Shane.
Eoghan Corry, editor of Air and Travel magazine, thank you for talking to Newstalk Breakfast this
morning. Thank you very much.